Hey everyone, it's Alexander Robinson. Welcome to the channel. So we are still in 2025, and yet here I am still talking about the movies of 2024. Because last year something monumental happened. The death of another cinematic universe. More specifically, the Sony Spider-Man-less Spider-Man universe, which consisted of the three Venom films, Morbius, Madam Web, and Craven the Hunter. Now, I had made a big stink about how I would not be seeing Venom: The Last Dance or Craven the Hunter until I know for sure that this cinematic universe is dead. Well, just a couple days before Craven the Hunter came out, it was announced that they'd stopped making these movies, so I figured, you know what? Why not? So I actually did see Craven the Hunter in theaters. I haven't had time to review it when it came out because it was the holidays and I had so much going on. But after seeing Craven, I went back home and immediately popped on Venom: The Last Dance. So I have seen both of them. I'm going to dedicate this video to reviewing both those movies, mainly because I don't have a lot to say that warrants two separate reviews. So let's officially kick this video off with my review for Venom: The Last Dance, which is the third and final Venom film to star Tom Hardy and is written and directed by Kelly Marcel. She wrote the first two Venom movies and 50 Shades of Grey, and now is in the director's chair for this one. This movie takes place immediately after Tom Hardy's Eddie Brock is kicked out of the sacred timeline, the MCU. So he's back in his regular old timeline, but Venom tells him that his homeworld has found him and is after the Codex, this artifact that his creator Null wants. And this artifact only appears whenever Venom fully transforms, so they are pretty much on the run from aliens and the law itself. It's no surprise that I dislike the first two Venom movies. The first one is just plain bad. The second one I think is even worse. Everybody says that this is their favorite of the Venom films, or at the very least, the most tolerable, which I don't get because that movie basically does everything that the first Venom movie did wrong and doubles down on it. Not to mention that stinger where it teased a fight between Tom Hardy's Venom and Tom Holland's Spider-Man, which pretty much went down the same route as Henry Cavill's Superman having a fight with The Rock's Black Adam. It never happened and never will happen, thankfully. So because of all that, I purposely did not see this movie when it came out in theaters, because I was firm on my stance that I will not see any of these movies until this series is dead. And when I decided to finally sit down and watch it, I actually didn't hate it. Now, it's not good, but I think it's probably the most tolerable of all the Venom movies, in my opinion. I couldn't exactly pinpoint my reason as to why this is my favorite of the three Venoms, but I think because there are many moments in this movie where it's more quiet and somber. It's not as chaotic as the first two films. So that was certainly a nice change of pace for the few quiet moments that this movie had. Another reason I found this to be better than the last two films is that the action's clearer, because the first two movies had a problem where it was just two symbiotes fighting each other, and at a certain point you couldn't even tell who was who. Even with the second movie, Venom is black and Carnage is red, and yet you couldn't even tell who was who because that fight was so poorly shot and poorly lit. This time around, you have a bunch of other symbiotes, but they're all teaming up against these giant alien creatures, and the camera's wide enough at a distance to where you can tell what's going on. It can be more creative at points because you can see what's happening, and the movie was just more entertaining when it came to these action scenes. So it may be a few elements, but I found this to be a big improvement over the last two movies. But that being said, those moments are few and far in between, because everything else about the movie is just straight up garbage. The opening film where Venom tries to make Eddie Brock a drink is just... it's a clear reminder of why I hate the comedy in these movies. Like, the Tom Hardy-Venom relationship is just the odd couple, as I've said so many times before, and I'm just sick of it. Like, it's not Venom, it's not Eddie Brock, it's just anything else but that character from the comics. The overall humor of the movie is just terrible. In fact, there's a moment where the movie just straight up stops for a good 20 minutes for Eddie Brock and Venom to fool around in Las Vegas, which consists of Venom having a gambling addiction, to having a pointless dance with Mrs. Chen, to a pee joke where this drunk gambler in a tuxedo pees on Eddie Brock's feet, and you're just like, you guys are supposed to be on the run. Why are we fooling around with this Las Vegas? It's not even a subplot, it's just a random detour and a terrible comedy skit at that. There's also so much wasted potential with a lot of these characters. Juno Temple plays a scientist who's studying the captured symbiotes in a secret area of Area 51, and she has a story where she got electrocuted as a kid and she can't move her arm because it's numb. You go through the entire movie forgetting that one aspect of the film, and then suddenly there's this out of nowhere payoff where she can move her arm again. And you were just like, what was the point of all that? Rhys Ifans plays this hippie dad with his family that's traveling across the United States trying to find aliens. And there's a certain point in the movie where they force themselves into the film's climax for no reason at all. Like, they were done, and yet they had to be involved with this big finale. The biggest wasted potential of the film is Andy Serkis as Null, who is essentially the creator of the symbiotes, and he's supposed to be the big baddie lurking in the background. He doesn't do anything. His big setup of the film's opening, is almost like the opening of the Avengers, where the other is addressing Thanos and is basically giving exposition about the Tesseract and its location on Earth. That's the same thing with Null in this film. But again, much like with the backstory of Juno Temple's character, you forget that Null is even a presence in this film, and it's not until the film Stinger where he decides to enact his revenge himself. And again, going back to that Black Adam stinger, that's not going to lead to anything, so what was the point? Bottom line, it's not a good film at the end of the day. It's got all the terrible comedy that you expect from the other Venom films. Tom Hardy is still as awkward as ever. There are points where he and Venom are having conversations where I can't even tell what they're saying. So I have to say, don't waste your money on it. Since this series is long dead, there's really no reason for you to watch it because this is not going to lead into anything. But if you choose to, I think you'll find this to be the most watchable of the three Venom movies, mainly because the action is more clear, you can tell what's going on, and there are a few scenes throughout the film that are very quiet and don't rely on the goofy, terrible comedy that these movies are known for. And I will tell you one other thing that is a positive about Venom: The Last Dance. It's not Craven the Hunter, because this movie, oh boy, let me say this right off the bat. I don't think this is as bad as Madam Web was. But that being said, I would honestly rather watch Madam Web before I ever rewatch Craven the Hunter, because so many people have called this the ultimate so bad it's good superhero movie. Like my buddy Sean Chandler has described this as the Room of superhero movies. For me, I look at this as the Jaws the Revenge of superhero movies. And what I mean by that is that this movie is boring. It takes itself really serious, and yet is littered with a few moments here and there that are so bad that they make you howl with laughter. This movie essentially plays out like Batman Begins, where the first half is the origin and the second half is the actual movie itself. So the first half of the movie is just a ridiculous origin story of Craven, his relationship with his brother and his father. And there's a certain point in this movie where Craven basically decides to leave his family because he hates his dad for killing the lion that attacked him in Africa. And then he just looks at that trophy on the wall, looks at his dad and goes, "He should have killed you!" And when that happened, I was laughing because of that line delivery. The Russian accents are just straight up terrible. People like Aaron Taylor Johnson and Russell Crowe, who are really good actors, are given some terrible dialogue, and their accents don't help whatsoever. Basically, this is the Russell Crowe superhero performance that I thought I got when he played Jor-El in Man of Steel. That wasn't until I rewatched the movie and went, you know what, he's actually pretty good as Jor-El. But it's also the Russell Crowe superhero role that makes you look at his role in Thor Love and Thunder and make you go, wow, he actually had more dignity as Zeus in Thor Love and Thunder than he does as this villain in Craven the Hunter. But I'm not going to blame Russell Crowe, I'm not going to blame Aaron Taylor-Johnson for their terrible performances, and I'm also not going to blame Ariana DeBose, who really should fire her agent because she's landing so many movie roles and all these movies are just terrible. The ISS movie that I saw earlier last year wasn't all that great. Argyle was terrible. Wish was not good. And then Craven the Hunter is also just really bad. And one moment in particular that if you follow Double Toasted, if you follow Sean Chandler, you've heard them talk about this line where she thinks back to her grandmother, and the line that she utters, and I have it written down here, is, "My grandmother died on that trip, and I never saw her again." Yeah, that's what death is. I mean, I think what's said about that line has been said already, so I'm just gonna move on. The action is fine. I mean, it's watchable, it's well shot, but it's not that impressive. It's just a stab there, a gunshot there, a kick there. And for being R-rated, I found the violence in this movie to be rather tame, especially after going home and watching Venom: The Last Dance right afterwards, where you have these giant monsters eating soldiers, and then blood is spewing out of these monsters' backs like they're wood chippers. And I'm thinking, Venom is PG-13. How is this more violent than Craven, which was rated R? Somebody goofed up in that department. Now, as for the movie's villain, you have the Rhino, who's played by Alessandro Nivola, and I couldn't take this villain seriously at all. He just seemed rather pathetic. When you get to the end of the movie and he transforms into the Rhino, he looks terrible. Like, the best thing I could say about Paul Giamatti's Rhino in Amazing Spider-Man 2 is that it was a suit, so it looked like a rhino. This version of the Rhino is much like with MODOK in Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania, where I'm thinking, there are just some comic book characters that can't translate well into live action. The best thing I can say about his performance is another unintentionally funny scene. There's a moment in the movie where he is told by one of his henchmen that somebody who worked for him died. And he's like looking down at a counter, and you expect him to just go, "Ah!" or "Shit!" just like his plans have been foiled. But instead, he makes this really weird noise that I'm going to try to attempt, but I don't know if I can successfully do it. But he just looks at that counter and goes, That's why I didn't want to do it, because it strains my throat. You can find it on YouTube, assuming Sony didn't take that clip down, and I don't normally like to encourage this, but you can find that clip online. And when that happened, when watching the movie, the entire theater burst into laughter. And I was the only asshole in that theater that was laughing his ass off throughout this entire movie. I was basically Robert De Niro from Cape Fear, but that one moment, everybody in the theater just lost it because it was just so unexpected. And also the fact that throughout this entire movie, he's wearing this white shirt and a tiny backpack, it just looks silly. Like, I know the reasoning why, and I get it, but it still looks ridiculous. There is one moment in this movie that I can legitimately say I enjoyed, and it's not even a moment that feeds into the main plot of the story. It's just a one-off scene that has nothing to do with anything. When Craven finally reunites with his brother, he goes to the restaurant that his brother is performing at, and he walks by a couple that's leaving the restaurant. He smells perfume and says, "Nice perfume," and the woman says, "Oh, thank you, but it's not me." And so Craven has this thought in his head like, oh, hey buddy, she's gonna find out sooner or later. So the wife looks at her husband after Craven says that and slaps him across the face. And I thought, this has nothing to do with anything in this movie. You could have cut that out and it wouldn't have mattered, but that was actually funny. That was like legitimately funny. And that's the best I could say about Craven the Hunter. I mean, I will say this, it never made me angry. This movie never infuriated me the same way Venom Let There Be Carnage did. Because I had no intentions of this being good at all. Considering that Sony announced the death of this cinematic universe days before Craven came out, I didn't expect much from this. So again, much like with Venom The Last Dance, I'm gonna say don't waste your money on it. This is the kind of movie that you need to see with a bunch of friends, with a lot of alcohol, a lot of weed, and you will have the time of your life, because watching it by yourself or with a group of people that just don't laugh at bad movies, it might not be that enjoyable. But if something like the Alamo Drafthouse set up a movie party with Craven as the featured film and you brought in a bunch of your friends, I think this could be really enjoyable. But honestly, Madam Web is the more spectacular mess when it comes to this cinematic universe, because Madam Web is almost commendable for how bad it is, for how incompetent it's made, for how little the cast and crew cared about it. Like, I said this in my Madam Web review, but I commend everybody for trying their best to not care. So, mad respect to them. Craven the Hunter, at the end of the day, is just a generic action movie. And there you go, those are my reviews for Venom The Last Dance and Craven the Hunter, finally putting an end to this ugly, hideous, and disgusting cinematic universe. Now, before I end the video, I want to address something that makes me so grateful that I waited so long to record this video. And that's the statement the Sony CEO made about these movies and why they flopped at the box office. It's because he didn't think the movies were bad itself, it's that the critics were so hell-bent on taking those movies down that that's the reason why they flopped. You know what? I hate that phrase. Like, I hated it when Armie Hammer said the same thing when The Lone Ranger came out. I hate it when any type of creative person says that, oh, this movie flopped because the critics, like, blame them. If that really was the reason why movies like Madam Web and Craven flopped, I would gladly take credit for them. I mean, I know that's not the reason at all. The real reason is because Sony kept putting out terrible movie after terrible movie after terrible movie, and the general public finally caught on. I truly believe that the Venom movie from 2018 was a fluke, because there was no hype going into that movie, and yet it made $800 million worldwide. And the reason for that, I truly believe, is because people were so desperate for something Venom related that wasn't Topher Grace in Spider-Man 3. But at the end of the day, as much as Topher Grace feels out of place in Spider-Man 3, I thought his Eddie Brock was far more faithful to the comics than what Tom Hardy's Eddie Brock ended up being. And then every movie that came out afterwards has made less money than the previous. Venom Let There Be Carnage made $300 million less than the first movie. Morbius and Madam Web were complete flops. Venom The Last Dance was financially successful, but only made $400 million worldwide. And then Craven, again, was another flop. And it's because people were starting to catch on that this cinematic universe was not good. Like, they kept putting out inferior products one after another, and the public caught wind of that. It's the very same reason why Justice League flopped at the box office, because the general public is not going to care about the behind-the-scenes drama. They're not going to care that Joss Whedon basically took over the movie after Zack Snyder left. As far as the general public is concerned, Zack Snyder directed both cuts of Justice League. But the reason that movie flopped and essentially killed the rest of the DC Extended Universe was because people didn't like Man of Steel and Batman vs. Superman. So when it came to Justice League, oh, we're just gonna get more of what we didn't like? No thank you. That's also the reason why Birds of Prey and The Suicide Squad flopped, because people were reminded of Suicide Squad and thinking, oh, more of what spawned from Suicide Squad. No thank you. That's the reason why this Sony Cinematic Universe failed, is because they kept making bad movies one after another to where the general public just said, enough is enough. I mean, after I saw Madam Web, I firmly said I am done with this series until it's dead. And there's a reason why I waited this long to watch and review both movies, because I wanted to wait until the cinematic universe was dead. And if you want my personal ranking of all these movies, I'll just give it to you right now because I don't want to dedicate an entire video to that. From worst to most tolerable, because there's no best in this situation, it would be Venom Let There Be Carnage, Madam Web, Craven the Hunter, Morbius, Venom, and Venom The Last Dance. But I have to put a disclaimer out of all these movies, I would honestly watch Madam Web over any of them just because I'm so fascinated at how terrible that movie is. But that's about it. I'm done with this series. We're all done with this series. And yeah, I've got nothing else to say. I'm winded out. So thank you guys so much for watching this video, and I want to give a special thank you to my subscribers and YouTube members right over here. You guys are the reason why this channel continues to grow, and if you want to help to financially support the channel and get access to perks that nobody else gets, you can join YouTube memberships for as little as $1.99 a month. But until next time, I want to know what you guys think about Venom 3 and Craven the Hunter. Whatever your opinions are, let me know in the comments below. Don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell button to get notifications. If you want to find me elsewhere on the internet, you can do so via these social media links and my theme park and travel channel right here on YouTube. I'll see you guys in the next video, but until then, have a good day and take care of yourselves.